Latest NHL BR Insider Notebook. Today is Tuesday, December 23rd, the eve of Christmas Eve. I'm Frank Seravalli. I've got my ugly Christmas sweater on as a devoted Philadelphia Eagles fan. All I want for Christmas is the tush push, of course. Nonetheless, we're here to talk hockey, and we've got lots happening as we've hit the NHL's holiday roster freeze. 2 trades squeaked in under the wire on Friday night before that holiday roster freeze. Perhaps some more to come in the weeks after the freeze is lifted before we head to the Olympics on February 4th. But nonetheless, let's make this an interactive show, the last before the Christmas break. And get your comments into the chat on YouTube as well as the BR app. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have, comments, concerns, criticism, whatever it is, you've got it. I'm here to talk hockey with you for the next half hour or so. Let's start off by talking about Jack Hughes and his impressive return to the New Jersey Devils lineup. First game back in more than a month. 1 goal in his first 8 minutes. The New Jersey Devils engine and heartbeat. Well, you could maybe make a case that no team is more reliant on one player than the Devils are on Jack Hughes. Consider this. Their record with him, 12-5-1, is a heck of a lot better than their record without him, which is 8-10-0 this season. The New Jersey Devils are scrapping, scratching, and clawing, trying to become a playoff team. So the big question is, now that they missed out on getting his brother Quinn Hughes from the Vancouver Canucks after he landed in Minnesota, what's next for the Devils? We know that they need scoring support. Will they deal from their embarrassment of riches on defense? Simone Nemetz, Seamus Casey has had a fantastic season in the AHL, has been very productive to this point in time. Dougie Hamilton, we know, has the no trade clause that perhaps limited the Devils. They've got a lot to consider here. This feels like a make or break season as pressure is mounting around the NHL. You saw the Toronto Maple Leafs earlier this week fire their assistant coach, Mark Savard, their power play coach, as their power play unit has ranked 32nd in the league to this point in the season. It's no longer just an early sample size. It's no longer that Jack Hughes had a freak injury. Well, the Devils have a lot of ground to make up, and there's no doubt that the pressure is mounting on that front. Let's take a peek at our chat here. Gio says, any Blackhawks news? Nothing of late. They're obviously dealing with the injuries to Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar. Definitely 2 untimely injuries that have sent the Hawks plummeting toward the bottom of the Western Conference standings. They struggle to score. They've drifted back toward lottery land. And they're now asking a lot of some players in their lineup. Ryan Green, for instance, come on down. You can be the number 1 center. I thought it was really kind of funny. The TNT promo for Tuesday's game against the Flyers was, well, it was an image of Louis Crevier squaring off against Trevor Zegras. We've reached some tough times in Chicago. So no doubt they can't wait to get Connor Bedard back in January. It'll be 4 weeks for Frank Nazar. And really what the Hawks are looking forward to is this World Junior Championship, a view of Anton Frondell, their number 2 overall pick from last June, the forgotten first-round pick from last June because it was Frondell and Mason West that we've talked so much about. What about Vaclav Nestrazil, who's had a great season at UMass? AJ Spellacy rounds out their World Junior group. And then, of course, the Hawks are going to be watching really closely. Roll the dice, however they come out of the chute, whether it's Keaton Verhoff, Gavin McKenna, or Ivor Stenberg. Those are going to be the first 3 players picked in 2026. Which order will be determined in no small part by the next couple weeks and the World Junior Championship, as those underagers are going to play big roles for Team Canada and Team Sweden. 610 Dub says, any Flyers rumors? No. Look, the Flyers are just cruising along. I think I've had some engaging conversations about what their team is, how aggressive they should be. They have the 3rd best points percentage today as we close in on the Christmas break and could cement that spot with a win in Chicago. I don't know, probably under the radar. You know, you expect the Carolina Hurricanes, of course. Definitely been a bit of a surprising start for the Flyers in terms of they've just kind of kept cruising along here. They found a way really importantly to get points in shootouts and overtime. And that part has been a big, if you look at their record on the whole, they're 18-17, so to speak, in NHL terms, but 18, 10, and 7 feels a lot different. So the Flyers are squarely in the mix. I don't think we have a real sense yet, with some standings clarity to come, as to how that will change or focus their approach when it comes to the trade deadline. So they're not there yet. Let's see. J-Man says, how hot is Chris Drury's seat? I'm going to say not very. I think this is an intriguing year because now Chris Drury is going to have the ability to chart a path one way or the other. So they've changed the coach again. They've made some significant roster changes. But as we get close to, and perfect time to talk about some Rangers buzz, is the approach next. If there's any team for me in the entire NHL that you look at this jumbled mess in the Eastern Conference that could use some clarity in terms of, are we going this way or are we going the other way? It's the New York Rangers. Because I've mentioned many times, I'm bullish on the Rangers and where they're heading. I think they've got a great goaltender, a franchise goalie that's locked up for their foreseeable future, a coach who has made meaningful changes to their structure that has better prepared them for playoff success. But now they're really struggling to score. Where are they going to get those goals from? And Artemi Panarin had a great matinee against the Flyers, for instance. But if the New York Rangers come mid-February are on the outside looking in, I have zero doubt that Chris Drury is going to pull the trigger and make a trade to move on from Artemi Panarin. He's asking for, or will be asking for, significant money, and more importantly, over significant term. The Rangers, at some point, although they really like Panarin and his contributions, are going to have to figure out what's the next iteration of this team. So are they taking a step back and are they retooling, so to speak, and figuring out who that next generation of players is going to be to help them score? Or are they going for it? And so it's almost like some would say, hey, Frank, the Rangers already have their answers so far this season. They're not in the playoff spot. But that's the trouble with the East, is a lot of the underlying metrics are really good, but they're one good week away from being a playoff team. So as I said, there's a lot of teams that are in that conversation. The Boston Bruins are another great example, but I have zero doubt that Chris Drury will make the tough decision required. It's just we don't have enough data yet. We don't have enough information yet to be able to properly make that designation. One thing Chris Drury's been really, really good at as Rangers GM has been figuring out the 30,000-foot view. He's not caught up in the day-to-day, roller coaster ride of what this team is or isn't in the standings. He's more thinking, do we have an authentic chance to win? And if the answer to that is yes, he's going to go out and provide the pieces. And if not, he wants to try and figure out, okay, how do we assemble what's required to get there? So I think more than most GMs, he's less, sort of focused on the little stuff, the micro, and he's way more focused on the macro, which I think has made him really good at his job. Topher says, any CBJ Columbus Blue Jackets rumors or more moves coming? Well, that's the interesting part about an 8th place team in the Metropolitan Division. As of last week, when they made the trade on Friday night before the freeze, bringing in Mason Marchment, they were the only team that was sub 500 points percentage in the NHL. And so you scratch your head and you go, Mason Marchment, who, by the way, scored another 2 goals for the Blue Jackets. He's got 3 goals in 2 games since joining the team. What are they doing adding a pending unrestricted free agent when it comes to being in that type of position? Well, one, they believe he can obviously help, and he adds that heft necessary. I love that he's playing on that line with Kent Johnson because I think he can do a lot of the work required for Kent Johnson to be successful. And 2, this is a player that their front office and management team, led by Don Waddell, clearly coveted because they almost signed him in Carolina before he went to Dallas. So what it does is it gives them optionality. They didn't really pay a significant price for Mason Marchment, and if they can rejoin the playoff race on his back or with his help, then it's a great move. They could re-sign him if that's the case, and they may want to anyway. I think they've had some early talks when it comes to that. Or they can use them as trade collateral when it comes to the deadline. Hey, we tried to get back in the mix, but in the end, it's not going to work out. We're not going to be a playoff team. We're not going to re-sign him, so we're going to trade him. I think there's some arbitrage there that they can get more back for Mason Marchand, particularly if he plays as well as he has to start, getting him out of Seattle, jump-starting his season. I think Mason Marchand could be a solid trade chip for the Blue Jackets again at this deadline, as opposed to just hanging on to him. So I think they've got some great optionality there, a no-lose situation, unless, of course, he gets hurt or something like that. Otherwise, the Blue Jackets have done a great job managing their assets in the sense that you bring him in, he helps bring you closer to a playoff spot, everyone's happy. And if not, you just move on and get more in return. Scotty says the New York Rangers should look to move Alexis Lafreniere. I mean, wouldn't argue with you. I think a fresh start could work, but that term and that contract is certainly going to be problematic. Rich says, what do you see the Sabres doing after the front office changes? Hey, interesting to see Jarmo Kekalainen begin to shape out his new front office. Brings in Mark Bergevin as associate general manager from the LA Kings. He, of course, guided the Montreal Canadiens to a Stanley Cup final. And added Josh Flynn, who was his top assistant in Columbus, a great salary cap, contracts, and data guy. And now, as they sort out the rest of their staff, figure out the coaching staff moving forward with Lindy Ruff, as the Sabres have become the hottest team in the league, 3-0 under Jarmo Kekalainen, coupled with the 3-0 run before firing Kevin Adams, means the Buffalo Sabres have won 6 straight. They really need to use this holiday break to get a yes or a no answer on the Alex Tuch situation. Give yourself as much runway as possible, particularly if Tuch is going to be a U.S. Olympian. You're going to want to make that trade if you're moving him before you get to the Olympic break. And Tuch is knocking on the door of that U.S. Olympic team, by the way. The other part of it is, if you're signing him, great. Begin to put the pieces in place, the pillars in place for who the next Buffalo Sabres leadership team is, because they desperately need to figure out their on-ice leadership. They're situating and answering the off-ice leadership question stemming from their front office, their coaching staff, then now figure the on-ice component, because that's one team that's been in desperate need of some quality leadership. Jack says Steven Stamkos to the New Jersey Devils, question mark. Look, I don't think it's impossible. Here's the thing. The Nashville Predators have played a lot better of late. Steven Stamkos sort of right at the very beginning of that. Remember, he had a 4-goal game. His season has been jump-started. A lot of people have said, is this getting teams interested in Steven Stamkos again? Look, I think there wasn't very much interest. So if that began to percolate or start the conversation, maybe. I think it's a bit of a reach. And if I could see a better fit for the Devils coming from the Nashville Predators, it would be Ryan O'Reilly rather than Steven Stamkos. But that's just me looking from afar. Roaring Eagle has a Sabres question. He says, will the Sabres be aggressive in making a roster move to have a new GM put his own stamp on the team? I think they will be as we get closer to the deadline. Obviously, Jarmo Kekalainen has had about 7 or 8 months to evaluate this team, joining the Sabres originally as an advisor. So he has a good sense of what works and what doesn't. I love seeing the rejuvenated blue line, Rasmus Dahlin, and his contributions. One other aggressive move that they're going to have to figure out is their goaltending situation moving forward. Who's part of it and who isn't? They basically have 4 guys on NHL contracts that they're going to have to sift through, as they don't obviously have room for all of them. And keeping the right guy, the Buffalo Sabres need consistent and stable goaltending for sure. Sleeping Diamond says, any chance Dallas re-signs Robertson, or is that someone that the New York Rangers can look to acquire if Panarin gets moved? Well, if the Dallas Stars are, and it's a big if the Dallas Stars are moving on from Jason Robertson, it's not going to be during this season. They've got a great opportunity and window to win. Robertson has had a massive season, and I would think they find a way to re-sign him and keep him part of this core. I don't know how you could not, to be honest. But if they don't have the room to do it, and they're going to have to make tough decisions, that is exactly the type of player. He could be your Panarin type replacement on the wing if you decide to not meet Artemi Panarin's demands and or you trade him. But I do not foresee a situation in which Dallas is moving on from Robertson during the season. That would be an off-season move. Take a peek at our YouTube chat here. Chase Miller says, do you think the Lightning will make any trades? I think what the Lightning desperately need more than anything this season is some health and a consistent lineup for John Cooper. They have been really banged up. Victor Hedman, Eric Chernak. It's, think about up front, Brandon Hagel. It's been impact player after impact player that's been out. And yet here we are, the Tampa Bay Lightning knocking on the door of the top of the Atlantic Division through all of that. Again, it's been a roller coaster season for so many teams in the East. Some health would be good. They've used a mash unit on defense. It's actually really impressive what they've accomplished without some of those guys in their lineup, and a testament to someone like a Ryan McDonough, for instance, and the work that he's done. But yeah, I could see Julien Brisebois definitely being aggressive to try and find a way for the Lightning to separate themselves in this East that's so jumbled. Think about the West and how we've got this sort of, it's actually the entire league. So you've got the Colorado Avalanche here. Then you've got the Dallas Stars, and probably could include Minnesota with how well they've played at 2 and 3. Then you've got basically like 4 through 25. And in that stretch, all right, I would put Carolina 4, and then 5 through 25. You've got like all these teams that with 7 good days can flip one way or the other. And it's amazing to watch all that happen. Some will view that through different prisms, right? Some will say, well, if we just have a good week at the right time of year we don't have to make any moves, maybe we could be that team. The Lightning might say, how can we find a way to make a move based on how Julien Brisebois does things, always evaluating, and someone that's pretty definitive in his viewpoint. Can we be that number 5 team? And how quickly can we get there to then provide separation between ourselves and everyone else? So yes, that's a long way of answering and saying, Chase, I do think the Lightning will be aggressive provided that they are still in the mix. So let's talk post-roster freeze moves. What will happen on the back end of this? So my prediction here is that the NHL's real trade deadline will not be March 6th. I think it's really going to be the day before the Olympic roster freeze in February. And the reason for that is, think about not just teams that would like some clarity on what they are or aren't, but what about players that are potentially on the move that will be participating in the Olympics? Take a Rasmus Andersson, for instance, from the Calgary Flames. There are so many games to play in January, and the Olympics are such a high leverage event that I don't think the Calgary Flames, for instance, are going to want to wait until after the Olympics to see whether or not Rasmus Andersson can survive and be healthy to make that trade that's such a significant moment for their franchise moving forward. I think they're going to want to get out in front of that, and I think a lot of teams are. Now, the risk, of course, is that teams that are acquiring those players are going to say, well, hey, I want to make sure that this guy gets through to the other side so that I can have him for the rest of the season. But I would think that there's going to be a re-signing component at some point that you're saying, okay, well, I'm going to go out and get this player. And yes, he might be subject to injury during the Olympics, but I'm going to be re-signing him for 6, 7, 8 years. So it's not going to matter. I'm in for the long haul, and I've given up these assets. I understand how that can cut both ways, and I'm not playing both sides. I'm driving a stake in the ground and saying, be ready for this next roster freeze. This is a special, unique NHL year. We do not typically see holiday roster freeze deals, and maybe there were some special circumstances with Marchment and Danault, but we do not typically see trades come down to the last few minutes of the roster freeze as we did on Friday night in the 11 o'clock Eastern hour like we have this year. And so same thing goes with the Olympic roster freeze. It's an Olympic year. First time NHL players are going back to the Olympics since 2014. Teams are going to want to do their business early. It's not going to be like December 28th when the freeze lifts. But think about that sweet spot between the calendar turning to 2026 and that 3 to 4 week period of time before the Olympics. That's when you're going to see a lot of NHL business get done and a lot of teams step up. And think about what we were just talking about, how jumbled the Eastern Conference standings are, for instance. That gives you an opportunity to separate yourself in that period of time. So if you're going to make a deadline acquisition, get out in front of it this year. Exciting time for NHL prospects, particularly with the World Juniors coming up here. Starting on Friday, Boxing Day in Minnesota. Games being hosted at Mariucci Arena, home of the Minnesota Golden Gophers, and Grand Casino Arena, home of the Minnesota Wild. The U.S., Team USA, looking for a three-peat as Canada looks to get back on track with perhaps the most talented roster on paper and a great viewing point for NHL fans of not just the next group of prospects to enter the league on display at the World Juniors, but also the next group of prospects for the 2026 NHL draft. You can shake up the dice and roll them whichever way they come out of the chute, 1, 2, or 3. The top 3 players that will be picked in the 2026 NHL draft will be on the ice in Minnesota next week. And that includes Gavin McKenna, forward for Team Canada, playing now at Penn State. Keaton Verhoff on defense, 6'4" right shot defenseman, perhaps the best defenseman to come out of the West in 30 years. He will be playing for Team Canada on the blue line, one of just 10 defensemen age 17 to be playing for Team Canada at a World Juniors, the under-20 World Junior event. And so that's exciting. And then on Sweden, Ivar Stenberg, who is certainly joined the conversation for that number 1 overall pick, as Gavin McKenna has struggled to put pucks in the net at Penn State. Verhoff having a great season at North Dakota, applying the heat as well. So this is an exciting time of year, not just because the NHL kind of cools it off during the holidays, no games on the 24th, 5th, or 6th, but love to see World Juniors take the spotlight. It's such an exciting tournament that goes all the way through January 5th. Last, but certainly not least, before we get to a couple more of your questions here, is the Edmonton Oilers goalie situation. What a great story brewing for the holidays. Connor Ingram gets his first NHL start in nearly a calendar year on Sunday, puts together a win. His story has been so incredible to watch. Connor Ingram, what he's battled through, the mental health struggles, OCD, which he's talked a lot about, alcoholism, losing his mom last year, who was such a big part of his life, and support system. And so his game had struggled as a result. The Utah Mammoth, he ended up seeking a change of scenery. They granted him that wish. He's gone to the Edmonton Oilers and spent this season entirely so far in the AHL in Bakersfield, where he had one of the worst save percentages with Tristan Jarry out. Cal Pickard also had the worst save percentage at the NHL level. And so the Oilers are between a rock and a hard place with their goaltending situation. Ingram comes in, once a bona fide NHL starter, counted on to help carry the Mammoth. And he comes in and plays a great game. So he's going to get some opportunity and runway here over the next couple weeks in tandem with Cal Pickard. But the big question is, if neither one of these guys can carry the ball, will the Oilers go out and make another move for a goaltender later once Tristan Jarry is healed up? I think they might have to, because when you consider how condensed the schedule is, you're probably going to need to rely on that number 2 guy 15 to 18 more times down the stretch, which is not an insignificant number for a team that hasn't afforded itself very much flexibility in the standings. But one name that I threw out there on Monday, and I think one to consider for the entire NHL, if I were Stan Bowman and the Edmonton Oilers, the first person that I'd be calling is Marc-Andre Fleury. Yes, see if you can get Flower to come out of retirement. Look, it's not a secret. Last week, Marc-Andre Fleury played in an outdoor game in Aspen, Colorado with some NHL alumni. And before that, he was on the ice with some of the Minnesota Wild extras taking some shots. And yes, Marc-Andre Fleury played in a preseason game for the Pittsburgh Penguins this year. This was supposed to be the cruise into retirement, off into the sunset for one of the game's most popular and beloved goaltenders, and also one of the most accomplished. I'm not entirely convinced that he's done just yet. It will take a special circumstance and situation, but maybe having an opportunity to win a Stanley Cup with this Edmonton Oiler team if they could get past the group of death in the Central Division. Well, that might be a really special story that allows him to pick up the phone. We'll see. I'm not projecting or predicting anything, but I think a name to keep in mind as we move into 2026 and beyond. Let's see what else is going on in the chat here. Brave Fox says, do the Mammoth do anything with their prospect pool at the trade deadline? They could dip into that, but think about what I was just saying about the Central Division and how difficult it will be with the Colorado Avalanche, Dallas Stars, and Minnesota Wild. I don't know that it's Utah Mammoth's time just yet. I don't know that you smash that button. Maybe give it some time and patience and see what this offseason brings. BC Knight says, with the emergence of Denver Barkey, will Bobby Brink be the odd man out and a possible trade piece? I think the Flyers would be making a mistake if they did that. I love what Bobby Brink brings to this team's lineup, the compete, the tenacity. He does so many little things right for the Flyers. I think he's a piece that they should hang on to. But I understand why you'd be asking that question. In the meantime, as they're dealing with some injuries, including Tyson Forrester, I think the Flyers are going to need someone like Bobby Brink to hang in the mix. And that'll just about do it here for our chat. It was great to hang with everyone today. And as we close out with our last BR NHL Insider Notebook here before the NHL's holiday break, just wanted to take a second to wish you and yours a very Merry Christmas and all the best during the holiday season. It's been great hanging with you and conversing with you, talking hockey all season long right here on the BR app as well as our YouTube stream. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.